Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today I got some serious work to do. I recently picked up this Gibson Goddess, and it's all in all in really good shape, but it does have some issues that absolutely need to be addressed, and I don't think that these frets or this fretboard have been cleaned in at least a year or maybe even more than that. So I do have a lot of tools and equipment necessary. There's some issues with the nut. We're going to be going over how to fix some of that if you're having similar problems, and the tools that you'll need in order to kind of bring a guitar back to life. So to begin with, I think it makes the most sense to see what we're going to be using today to accomplish this. To begin with here, we are going to be using the Eternashine Guitar Player's Kit for getting rid of some of the scratches and polishing this thing up. I do have my FretNot. This is going to be really good for polishing the frets themselves. I have this set of Grover tuners that are locking 18:1 ratio. Just one of those things I've had in the parts bin for a while, and the tuners on this one, when we get to it, I'll explain why I'm choosing to switch those out. We have a regular polish. We have a set of strings. We're obviously going to need that. Q-tips, don't need to show you those, but these are extremely important. These are Stumac nut files. These are going to be vital to making sure that this nut is going to not bind, because that's part of the issues that we're having right now. Finally, to finish this thing off, F1 oil and probably 5 or 6 different little cloths that we can clean different parts of the guitar with. So let's get started. All right, I'm shining this directly under the light to do my best to try and show you just how scratched up this thing is. This has definitely been worn. And again, on the back, we're not going to be able to get rid of all this buckle rash. It's just not going to happen. But we can clean it up a little bit here. The guitar just needs a little bit of tender love and care. If you take a look at the frets themselves and the fingerboard, a little ratchet, a little dirty. So we're going to try and take care of that as well. Now, the first thing that we have to do before we get started on anything else is to remove the strings. But while these old strings are still installed, I'd like to show you, or let you listen to, a way that I was able to recognize that the nut itself was having a little bit of issues and it was leading to some of the tuning instability. When you turn the pegs, you don't want to hear any of that pinging, binding in the nut. And it was happening, yep. There you go. You don't want to hear that at all. So that means it could be just that these strings are really old. Or also could be that the gauge of the strings aren't exactly matched for the nut. It could also just mean that these strings are super old and the nut needs to be just cleaned and then lubricated back up before we get going. So now that we know that out of the way, let's remove these strings and we'll begin with the cleaning. Give it a first base kind of cleaning here, because before you do any real cleaning, you don't want to be cleaning on a surface that's dirty. So give it a real baseline, get some of the really basic stuff off of this guitar so it will be in good shape, or better shape, so that when we use the scratch remover, it will work better. See, even right there on the pickup rings, there's a lot of dirt that was built up on that, but that's to be expected. This guitar is 15 years old. Makes me feel really old because I'm quite a bit older than it, but I remember having this only a few years after it was released, and it seems like yesterday in 2010. All right, after that initial cleaning, there are a lot of scratches really evident on this guitar. My goal on this specific instrument is not to remove all of them. I want to just make it a little bit nicer, because this finish is, all things considered, really decent. So which one to use first? The red first, the blue second. I like how they even label that on these kits. See right there, numero uno. And then on the blue, you got your 2. So it makes it pretty idiot proof, and for somebody like me, you definitely want that. So shake the thing up like a shake weight, those terrible commercials. Now, the important thing with this stuff is you really want to have separate rags. Oh, that was a lot more than I wanted. Okay, so we'll start here on the middle of the instrument. Seal this back up. And it's not a bad thing to put a little bit of force into this. You're not going to damage the finish by doing that, so long as you're using a cloth that is clean. Okay, good. Now let's go ahead and we'll fold this rag so we can get a second usage out of it for other parts of the guitar before we wipe off here. Now this is the real problem area for obvious reasons, and that's because it's where a lot of the picking happens. So here and there, those are my two main kind of trouble shots that I identified. So yep, same thing. We're just gonna really rub this in here. Now let's take another cleaning cloth here. And let's see how this first red did with the player's kit. Already leaving a very nice shine to it. But shine and scratch removal are very different things. So I don't expect, just like when we tried this on the double bound Telecaster, that this is going to be doing a whole ton as far as removing the scratches, but it did absolutely make the finish come a little bit more to life. Yeah, absolutely. So already a big improvement. If I wasn't trying to get rid of some of these surface scratches, I'd be happy with that. Okay, now that we're done with that, we're gonna go ahead and put away red number 2 for now. Shake up our blue. You really wanna shake this stuff up pretty well here. And again, cannot stress enough, it's important. Have a second rag. Now on this, we want to make sure, first I'm gonna do a little test run here. There we go, okay, it's coming out good. I'm gonna focus so much more on these areas that have the scratches. I'm gonna go position to position to try and help this out. So, fold this rag up into a square. Really dig in here. I'm pushing pretty hard, pretty aggressively, trying to get rid of some of these. And again, it is vital that you use a clean rag when you're doing this part, because if you don't, you're going to be rubbing in things that are stuck on the rag into the finish, and you're actually going to be adding more scratches to it, which is really against what the purpose of what I'm trying to do would be, and that is remove some of these. And that has done a little bit. Now I'm gonna have to have a few more passes at this, but already it's a little bit better. So we'll do the same thing. Try a little more up here this time, spread it out a little bit. Have a little check. This is doing good, but really our big problem is down here now and here. This actually is cleaned up very well. Now that's something you love to see. Watching a scratch be removed as you polish it out with this compound. That's beautiful. Okay, so this isn't perfect. I didn't want it to be perfect, but it's a huge improvement. And the reason I don't want it to be perfect, I play a lot of funk, man. I'm pretty loose with my right hand, so I don't want to make it too perfect because obviously there's no pickguard on this guitar, and I don't want to install a pickguard because, I don't know, it kind of ruins the aesthetics. So just want it cleaned up a little bit. Okay, now we're just gonna do the same thing over the rest of the guitar. All right, this is so much better than when we first started. I know it might not seem like so, but in the room here, this is one of those things where I dislike YouTube because it's gonna be really hard for me to translate. I tried to show you some befores and afters, but this has a very nice shine to it right now. One thing you want to do when you finish up though, you want to inspect the sides of the guitar. See some of that, call that dangling. And we'll just make sure that that's taken care of, but we will be addressing that also. I find it's better to do that on the stand. I might do that off film just for the sake of easing it so I don't have to use the camera, but just know you should always double check to make sure that there's no spillover from any of the things that you're using to clean the guitar onto the sides, the back, or worst case scenario, into any of the areas that are going to house electronics. All right, now we're gonna be removing these old tuners. This is simple. Just be careful. Keep everything together. I like to put washers with bolts. And you'll see why I do the top first in just a second. But this will also allow us to clean the actual fingerboard itself here and the front of this headstock here much easier than if the tuners were on. We'll do that while it's off. So that one's a little tight. Okay, so these ones are a little tight. Now notice it didn't take a whole lot for me to get that loose. You don't want to over tighten these, otherwise you're going to crack, and you're going to see cracks in the front of the headstock, and especially on a guitar like this, you really don't want that. So see, just that little bit, that's all you have to do as far as the tightening goes. This is not one of those scenarios where the screws have to be extremely snug for it to work. Okay, again, that's it. Just a little bit, goes a long way. Okay, the reason I do the first part on the top is so now you'll notice how easy this part is as far as removing the tuners. Look, pops out, nothing falls to the ground, no potential damage or anything like that. And we'll do the same thing where we put each screw back in with its corresponding tuner. Don't lose anything. All right, in case you're wondering why the tuners are already installed and you didn't get to see it, the battery on this camera died, so I'm really sorry about that. But the good news is it's pretty much exactly as I showed you for disassembly. For reassembly, it's just everything is done in reverse. Now we are onto the nut. Now with this, what I like to do, you have to know what string gauge you like. I use these hybrid slinkies that are 9 through 46, okay? When I chose my nut files from StewMac, I made sure that I chose ones that were one size bigger. So for example, you can see here, 10. That means there's gonna be a little bit more space. Now these aren't terrible. This nut wasn't cut terrible, just needs a little bit of cleaning. And one thing that the file itself will do is clean out some of any built up dirt or anything in that. Another thing to keep in mind here, I'm angling it downward. I'm not putting too much pressure on it because it wasn't that bad. And also, you want to make sure that you're angling towards where the break angle is. So for example, on this string, it's not going to go straight through nearly as much as on this string because it's going to have to go that way. So same thing, just angle it. Oh, I want to use the right file. Okay, so 16 now. We use the right file for this. Just, okay. There we go. Very good. And see, that even removed some of the built up dirt in it, which might have been the culprit all along, but as long as we're not doing too much of a shave down here, we're not going to have a problem. This is a high quality bone nut, at least from Gibson, so this should be okay. Now we just keep repeating the process. Angle downward, go easy. You want it smooth. Notice how it's going very smoothly. That's a good sign. Okay, all good. All right, first thing we gotta do. This F1 oil is amazing. You don't need a lot. See, I'm just using tiny dots on each of the individual fret spots here. Now, I love that this is an ebony fingerboard. Getting fewer and far in between on a lot of models. It used to be a lot more common to find ebony. Now, that's not the case. So we definitely want to make sure we're taking good care of it. And if at any point, any of it just like what you just saw there happens, where some of it spills over, take another cleaning rag and real quick, hit it on the actual finish of the body, because you don't want that on that beautiful, beautiful blue paint. Now, what I like to do, when it's a really dirty fingerboard like this, we're breaking out the Q-tips. Go in between here, get as much of this gunk and dirt out as possible. So if you ever feel like you're bringing in your guitar and they're overcharging you, so to speak, to really clean up an instrument and get it back in full working order here, I want you to consider, I have already spent an hour of my time doing this. Now, am I the best at this? No. And also, most people and professionals that are doing this, they're not adjusting the camera. They're not making sure that the lighting is okay so that they can see, or the camera rather, can see exactly what's going on and why they're doing it. But this stuff does take time. If you want something done right or done well, you have to be willing to invest the time in it. And if you're not willing to invest the time in it and you're going to pay somebody else, their time is valuable. This is all tedious stuff, but it's necessary stuff for the upkeep and the restoral of your instrument. And it's also a good thing to just, you don't want problems to build up over time and become ignored. It's just like any other tool that you have. If you address problems early, they're easier to remedy than if you just keep stalling out and eventually they become major problems. I know that sounds like common sense and really it can be applied to anything in life, but I feel like it needs to be said. Show some love to these people that you bring your guitars into if you're one of those guys that does do that. And notice the Q-tip does an exceptional job of getting into areas, especially around the nibs, that a cloth is going to have a little bit of a harder time getting to. All right, the fretboard itself looks 1,000 times better than it originally did, but we got one thing left we want to do on this neck, and that is use this FretNot to polish these frets up. One thing I love about FretNot versus Gorgamite, which is another cleaner of frets you can use, the FretNot comes already pre-cut into small pieces, whereas when you get Gorgamite, it is just one large sheet. You could, oh, see? Dang. All right, so we're gonna have a lot of FretNot used to get these really polished up. Yeah, this is a lot, but I do appreciate, back to the point with the FretNot, that it's done for you. It comes in a bag that's already resealable on it. It's very, very nice, and I like doing this after I do the fretboard because it also could be used to finish off a fretboard. This way, I'm not doing all the frets and then potentially getting some of the F1 oil back on them. That would not be ideal at all. Wouldn't be the end of the world. It would just add another step that I would have to redo. And that's not what I'm about. I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. Let's see, you put some real pressure on that and yep, again, that is just very black. Very, very, very black. You can do it. Maybe not. Oh well. Alright, as you can see from some of the before and afters on these frets, this FretNot works exceptionally well, and it's not a big mess to clean up because we just reseal the bag that has the rest of the little sheets in it. We're done. So that can go into the trash bin. Then I'll take all the Q-tips as well that we use to help clean this thing up. We'll remove those. I'm going to wash my hands, which is another thing that should definitely be done because you're using a lot of different cleaners. You really should be doing this in a place that has good ventilation in as well. This is not all things that you should be breathing it in mass. It is also really advised that you should be taking breaks every once in a while. All right, we are now at the home stretch. I am not going to be addressing the buckle rash or any of the serious scratches in this video because I want to make a whole video just on that. So right now, we're going to string this thing back up. Then after it's strung up, I'm going to do one or two other little things. Hopefully, this thing is good to go, and that will be the end of that. And this is a wraparound bridge. So, one of the last things we need here, the nut sauce. a little bit, just a little bit right there. We're gonna go ahead. These are locking tuners now. Oh, the ratio is so much better on these. And these are the pinwheel types, so they're not like the Gotos that come on the Fender Japan stuff, or the ones that were on this guitar that are self-locking. These are just straight up locking tuners. We'll go ahead, pull that through nice and taut. Make sure that that lubricant's really good. Once we have good tension, I'm going to tighten it. Very good. Now that's tightened, all I have to do, snip, snip. All right, you notice? No sound. Means there's no binding. Job well done, Jimmy. Yep, so it might have just been something like I said earlier in the video, where it could have just been potentially the old strings had some dirt that was forcing it to bind into the nut itself, but a little bit of extra leadway being slotted out from that nut, and you know, a nice cleaning, some lubrication, new set of strings. This should be all good to go. Let me just clean up, and I'll see you in a second. All right, now the guitar's put back together and we're almost finished up. I just want to go over a few things before we do the final steps needed to plug in and give it a test. First is, I like to take all the dirty rags, put them in a plastic bag. This way, they're out of the way. You don't have to worry about chemicals just kind of lingering on in the room that are on these rags. I could throw this right into the next wash by themselves and I'll be done with that. You'll make your significant other a lot happier if you decide to do that. Trust me, guys, I know a thing or two about making mistakes in that kind of way. However, that being said, even if you're just by yourself, it's best to just have them in a safe place and then not dispose of them, but get them clean and ready to go. So now I have two things left that I want to do. Well, three. The first is I've already tuned this up to regular standard, roughly. Next, we stretch the strings out. In case you've never seen me do this, this is extremely important, I feel, to making sure that right off the bat, you're gonna have really good tuning stability with whatever guitar it is that you've just restrung. So getting it tuned up to the pitch it's going to be at, and then slowly but surely adding pressure and doing it as you go up and down the fretboard, holding down, this will help stretch out the strings much faster than some other methods. In my experience, I used to just rely on heavy bends and just keep doing it. Heavy bends and heavy bends. Sure, that works well on the E, the B, and the G, not so much on the D, the A, or the big old E. So, yep, just make sure this is all stretched out. This will be a process that I repeat 2 or 3 times, and then I shouldn't have to worry about it ever again. And one thing that I already noticed when I was doing the initial tune-up of this guitar, all that noise was in fact gone from the binding at the nuts. So we have remedied that issue. Not bad for somebody who is not even remotely qualified to be a guitar tech. But, yep, same thing. All right, so now when I play this is gonna be wildly out of tune. To be expected. So retune it up. The G string already went, so not that bad. Okay, so all I'm gonna do here is I'm not gonna make you guys watch me do the final kind of stretching out and stuff like that. Like I said, I'm gonna do this 2 or 3 more times. On Les Pauls and Gibson style instruments in general, I do it more than I would if it was a Fender style instrument because those are straight through, or a Paul Reed Smith, same kind of deal with those. I find that those stay in tune a lot quicker after a little bit of stretching versus one of these guys. But if you spend the time, you do it the right way, you're gonna get what you put out of it. So, you're gonna get out of it what you put into it, rather. Last thing I like to do, I have the tuner on so you're not gonna hear this pop. We have one little last bit of cleaning. what I like to do on these guitars, let me make sure I'm not going to hit the pedal board, the neck especially. I do like regular old Gibson guitar polish for this, believe it or not. Now, just give it one spray. Didn't need much. Last rag. Now this does wonders for how the neck is going to feel. I like to save this for the last step because then, after I've done everything else, the guitar really, in theory, would be ready to play. Even though I'm going to turn this camera off right after I get done telling you about this and showing you why I do this. I am going to do a little bit more as far as the stretching out of the strings, but I figured I might as well go over this as if we were finished. Last thing, same thing on the body itself. One last polish, and yes, I saved one last rag. We'll go over our results and be happy. But overall here, man, what a cool guitar this is. Seriously, what a cool guitar. And this is it. This is now a finished, not perfectly restored, but absolutely in 100% better condition, both in playability-wise, stability-wise, and just condition than it ever was before I had started. Now, that's all I got for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. I know this was all over the place. I am lightheaded. I think I inhaled a few too many of these fumes. I'm going to go out and get some fresh air. Maybe I'll play a little bit of a demo at the end of this video, just kind of an outro. If not, again, I'm going to do a full video on this guitar at a later date. So, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Take it easy.